The road leading to the mountain village twisted like an old scar, cutting through gray hills and silent fields. Amina walked the last stretch alone, the weight of her small travel bag, nothing compared to the heavier burden inside her chest. The cold air stung her face, but she welcomed it. It kept her mind sharp, stopping old memories from flooding in all at once. It had been 7 years since she last came here. 7 years since she had turned her back on the traditions her family tried to pass on. She once thought leaving would free her from the strange rituals, the whispered warnings, the superstitions that filled the village. But now, returning for her grandmother's funeral, she felt guilt settle in her heart like thick fog. She reached the first old wooden houses on the edge of the village. Their walls were cracked, their roofs sagging. Even the air felt different here, heavy and still, as if holding its breath. Amina paused, listening. No children's voices, no animals, no sound of sweeping yards or chopping wood. It was as though the village had forgotten how to live. Whispers drifted through her mind, rumors she had heard on the drive up. Unexplained deaths, sudden illnesses, shadows seen at night, people disappearing without reason. She had dismissed them at first, thinking they were the same old stories the villagers always created to scare one another. But now, standing in the empty street, she felt a chill crawl down her back. As she moved deeper into the village, she noticed small things that unsettled her even more. The stone altar near the well was broken. The ritual flags once tied between houses were torn and faded. Someone had smeared ash across the entrance of a home, the kind used in old protective rites. None of this felt normal. It felt like a warning, a quiet one, but sharp enough to leave her uneasy. Amina tried to shake it off and forced herself to focus on the path to her grandmother's house. She kept her eyes forward, though her mind drifted back to childhood memories. She remembered how her grandmother used to sit by the fire, her voice steady as she spoke of spirits, dreams, and the secrets of the old world. Amina never wanted any of it. She wanted city lights, simple answers, and a life without strange rules. So she left, never thinking how much it would hurt to come back only when it was too late. A sudden gust of cold wind rushed through the street. Amina hugged her jacket closer and noticed something odd at the corner of her vision, a dark round shape leaning against an old shed. She turned her head slowly, but the object was too far to make out clearly. Still, something about it felt familiar. A dull, unsettling tug pulled at the edge of her memory. She turned away quickly. She didn't want to think about old things, especially not about the ceremonies her grandmother once performed, about the drum her grandmother guarded with more care than anything else. A drum made of stretched hide and carved wood. A drum that was said to carry the voices of their ancestors. A drum that had not been touched since the night of the tragedy, the one no one dared speak of. Amina swallowed hard, pushing the thought out of her mind. She didn't come here for ghosts or memories. She came to pack her grandmother's things, pay her respects, and leave. Finally, she reached the house, small, worn, and standing at the edge of the forest like a lonely guardian. The front door was slightly open, as if waiting for her. Her heart tightened. This was the home she had run from, and now the home she had no choice but to face. She stepped inside. The air was cold. The rooms were dark. Dust lay thick over the furniture. But beneath all of that, Amina felt something else, an ache of longing and a quiet fear she couldn't name. The door creaked shut behind her, and for the first time since she arrived, she realized she was truly alone. Yet the silence around her felt too heavy, too deep, as if something unseen had been waiting for her return. The house felt even colder the next morning, as if the night had sunk into the walls and refused to leave. Amina moved from room to room with slow steps, letting her fingers brush over dusty shelves, old blankets, and cracked picture frames. Everything here carried the weight of her grandmother's presence. Yet without her, the home felt like an abandoned shell. She had come to sort through her grandmother's belongings, but she found herself unable to start. Every drawer she opened, every object she touched, tightened the knot in her chest. It felt wrong to disturb anything, as if she were stepping into a life she had no right to claim after so many years away. Still, She pushed herself forward. She reached the back hallway, where the air seemed heavier and the light dimmer. At the end of that hallway was the storage room, a place she remembered only from childhood. Back then, the door was always locked, and her grandmother warned her not to wander inside. Some things must rest, she would say. At the time, Amina thought it was only another strange rule. Now, the door stood slightly open. Amina hesitated before entering. The room smelled of dust and wood, mixed with something old and earthy, like dried herbs. Shelves were stacked with boxes, wrapped cloth bundles, and jars sealed with wax. She felt as if she had stepped into a forgotten world, one her grandmother worked hard to protect. As she searched through the shelves, she noticed a large trunk pushed against the far wall. Unlike the other items, this trunk looked ancient. Its wood darkened with age, its metal lock rusted but still strong. Something about it called to her, not loudly, but in a deep, quiet way that stirred the bottom of her heart. She crouched beside it and traced her fingers along the carved patterns on the lid. They were simple shapes, yet full of hidden meaning, circles, lines, and symbols her grandmother once tried to teach her. Amina never cared enough to learn, but now the symbols felt strangely familiar. She found a small key hanging on a nail nearby. For a moment, she wondered if she should leave the trunk alone. A part of her whispered that opening it would bring trouble. But another part, stronger, sadder, needed answers, needed connection, needed something of her grandmother to hold on to. The lock opened with a soft click. Inside, wrapped in thick cloth, lay an object she recognized instantly, even though she hadn't seen it in years. The old ceremonial drum. It looked older than she remembered. The wood was cracked, and the stretched hide was faded, but the shape was unmistakable. Her breath caught in her throat. She reached out slowly and touched the cloth, not daring to uncover it completely. Her hand trembled. She didn't know why she felt afraid. She only knew that this drum held something powerful, something her grandmother had guarded fiercely. A memory rose in her mind, clear and sudden. She was a child again, sitting by the fire while her grandmother spoke in a low, steady voice. "The drum remembers," she said. "It remembers every story, every prayer, every soul that ever touched it." Back then, those words made no sense. Now, standing over the drum, Amina felt them settle heavily on her shoulders. She lifted the drum carefully, and its weight surprised her. It felt heavier than it should, as if the past lived inside it, as if the drum was waiting. A cold wave moved through the room, raising goosebumps along Amina's arms. She placed the drum back in the trunk quickly, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to shut the lid and walk away, but she couldn't shake the strange pull she felt, an emotional mix of longing, fear, and something like sadness. Leaving the storage room, she stepped outside to breathe. But the villagers had already gathered near her gate, their eyes fixed on her with unease. Their gazes were sharp, filled with warnings she didn't understand. She sensed their fear, not of her, but of the house, of the past, and most of all, the drum. Even without speaking, she could feel their message. Do not touch what should remain buried. Do not awaken what once caused pain. But Amina carried a different fear, one rooted in grief, not superstition. She feared never understanding who her grandmother truly was. She feared losing every piece of her family story. She feared that leaving things buried would only deepen the emptiness she already felt. So she returned to the storage room, closed the trunk, and hid it beneath old blankets. She didn't want anyone to see it. Not yet, because despite the warnings, despite the fear, she knew she could not ignore the drum. Something inside her whispered that the truth lived there, waiting for her, and she was no longer willing to run from it. Night settled over the village like a heavy blanket, thick and unmoving. The moon hid behind clouds, and the silence outside Amina's window felt deeper than before. Too deep, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. She lay awake on her grandmother's old bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to rest. Thoughts churned inside her mind. The drum, the trunk, the village's fearful eyes. Everything felt tangled together, forming a knot she couldn't loosen. Amina sat up, rubbing her arms as a cold draft slid through the room. She wasn't sure if it came from an open window or it was something else entirely. Her grandmother's house seemed full of corners that whispered memories she didn't want to hear. Still, she found herself drawn toward the storage room again, as if something called her. She rose from the bed and walked through the dark hallway. Each step echoed softly, almost too softly, like the house was swallowing the sound. Her heartbeat felt loud in her ears. The storage room door stood half open, just as she had left it earlier, but now the space behind it felt alive with a strange tension. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by the weak glow of the moon slipping in through a cracked window. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and distorted. Her eyes landed on the trunk, still hidden beneath the blankets. But even covered, she felt its presence sharply, like a pulse in the air. She knelt beside it and slowly pulled the blankets away. Her hands shook, though she tried to steady them. All evening she had tried to ignore the feeling tugging at her, but it was stronger now, quiet but powerful, urging her to uncover what she feared. She lifted the drum from the trunk. This time she did not set it back down. She placed it gently on the floor, the hide cold against her palms. A strange shiver crawled up her spine. The drum seemed almost too cold, as if it had never been touched by warmth. Amina studied it in silence. Every crack, every faded line in its surface felt like a fragment of a forgotten story. She wondered what her grandmother had seen in it, what secrets she had carried alone. Her chest tightened, filled with a mix of sadness and longing. She reached out and traced her fingers across the hide. The moment her skin touched it, the air changed. A cold wind swept through the room, though the window did not move. The floor seemed to tremble. A distant, low hum rose from the drum, not loud, but deep enough to vibrate through her bones. Amina froze, breath trapped in her throat. She tried to pull her hand away, but she couldn't. It felt as though something held her in place. The hum grew louder, building like a heartbeat from another world. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint, almost like the buzzing of insects. But slowly they sharpened, soft voices drifting through the air, layered on top of one another. Some sounded tired, some angry, some full of sorrow, so deep it felt like a weight pressing against her chest. She couldn't understand their words, but she felt their emotions: grief, fear, longing, and something darker. Regret. Amina's heart pounded. She wanted to run, but another part of her, the part filled with grief for her grandmother, couldn't move. She felt a strange connection, strong and painful, as if the voices were reaching for her, as if they knew her. The whispers grew clearer. A sound like her name slipped through them. Her breath caught. The cold intensified, wrapping around her like icy hands. The room blurred at the edges. Images flashed before her eyes, quick, blurry shapes that came and went in an instant. A fire in a circle of stones, a crowd of faces filled with fear, a woman holding the drum with shaking hands. The visions were fragmented, like pieces of a broken mirror. Amina tried to steady herself, pressing her free hand to the floor. The wood felt warm compared to the drum's chilling surface. A strange sadness built inside her, heavy and overwhelming. It wasn't just hers. It felt borrowed, like the grief of many lives pressing into her. For a moment, the voices fell silent. Then one voice, clearer, closer, rose above the rest. It sounded old, trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. Though she couldn't understand its exact words, she felt its plea deep in her chest, sharp like a blade. "Help us." Amina jerked her hand away. The drum fell silent. The cold faded, leaving only her rapid breathing and the echo of the voices in her mind. She stumbled back, pressing a hand to her heart. Fear twisted in her stomach, but something else rested beneath it. A strange pull, a quiet longing, as if part of her recognized the voices even if she could not name them. She should have been terrified, and she was. But she also felt something she hadn't felt since she arrived. A sense of purpose, faint but undeniable. She stared at the drum, trembling. She knew this was no accident. The voices had awakened. and they had called her for a reason. Lena begins to hear the voices even when she is not touching the drum. Faint murmurs slipping into her waking moments, echoing in her dreams. Emotional toll increases. Exhaustion, confusion, and an unsettling feeling of being followed by memories that are not her own. Suspense heightens as the voices start to merge into clearer messages. Warnings, regrets, pleas for justice. The drum guides Lena into her first immersive ancestral vision. She sees a young woman, her ancestor, standing in a burning village, clutching the same drum. The woman suffers a betrayal by someone close to her, a trusted friend who sides with an invading group. Lena feels the emotional intensity, terror, betrayal, helplessness. This vision leaves Lena trembling and emotionally overwhelmed, questioning how much of this pain belongs to her lineage and how much is seeping into her own identity. Lena turns to local archives, oral storytellers, and community elders. She uncovers fragments of a forgotten conflict, one that was erased from official history due to shame, loss, and political shifts. Emotional theme: the loneliness of being the only one willing to uncover a truth others prefer to avoid. She discovers the drum was traditionally used by women of her bloodline as a vessel for memory, grief, and spiritual communication. Suspense builds when she learns that those who carried the drum were often silenced or ostracized because of the burden it brought. The voices become clearer, more urgent. Lena begins to distinguish individual personalities. A stern elder who speaks with authority. A broken mother who whispers fragments of a tragedy involving a disappeared child. The young ancestor she saw in her vision, urging Lena to finish what we could not. Lena realizes the voices are not simply sharing stories. They're pushing her toward a specific action, though the purpose remains unclear. Emotional tension. Lena feels torn between honoring them and fearing them. Lena studies the drum more closely, noticing carvings she had overlooked. She learns these symbols map out a generational cycle of betrayal and loss. Cryptic warnings etched by different ancestors at different times. A central mark stands out, a broken circle representing a disrupted lineage or severed trust. Lena senses the drum is not just an artifact. It is a living testament to unresolved emotional wounds that demand closure. Through conversations with her grandmother, Lena uncovers a painful truth. Her own family once benefited from the betrayal that destroyed their ancestral village. Her bloodline carries both the victims and the perpetrators. This revelation devastates Lena, creating an emotional storm. Shame, guilt, confusion, and a desire to make things right. Suspense peaks as the grandmother warns her that the drum was sealed away for a reason, because the truth it contains can destroy or redeem a person, depending on what they choose to do with it. Lena isolates herself, struggling with internal conflict. How can she honor the voices of the dead if her own ancestors caused their suffering? Is she being asked to correct a wrong or carry the punishment for it? She experiences recurring visions of a crossroad, a metaphor for the choices facing her lineage. Emotional theme: accepting the complexity of inherited trauma, how pain and wrongdoing can exist side by side within the same family history. As Lena listens more intentionally, she discovers the voices don't want revenge. They want truth to be acknowledged and the cycle of secrecy to end. They seek healing, remembrance, and reconciliation, suspenseful undertone. Although the voices desire peace, they warn that failure to act will unleash consequences, not supernatural punishment, but the emotional decay caused by continued denial. Lena decides she will uncover the complete story, no matter the cost. She vows to restore the broken circle symbolically and emotionally by giving a voice to the forgotten dead. Emotional crescendo. She realizes this journey is not just about the past. It is about healing future generations, including herself. As this section closes, Lena is pulled into her most haunting vision yet. She sees a child standing alone in a desolate landscape, calling for help. The child turns, and Lena recognizes them, not as an ancestor, but as a representation of the future her choices will shape. Lena intentionally uses the drum again, prepared this time for whatever darkness awaits. The world around her dissolves into a liminal space, a vast night sky lit by drifting embers and silhouettes. The vision realm feels heavier now, shaped not only by ancestral memories, but by Lena's emotional turmoil. Suspense heightens as she senses presences that feel colder, angrier, and less articulate than before. The shadows of the past that still cling to unresolved pain. Figures emerge from the darkness, their forms blurred and flickering. Victims whose stories were erased. Betrayers whose shame twisted their spirits. Unnamed ancestors trapped in cycles of regret. They do not speak in clear words. Instead, they radiate raw emotions, fear, sorrow, rage, creating an overwhelming psychic pressure. Emotional intensity. Lena feels their pain as if it were her own, nearly collapsing under the weight of generations' worth of grief. A singular entity separates from the crowd, a tall, looming shadow with defined, human-like edges. This figure acts as an embodiment of ancestral injustice, neither demon nor ghost, but the collective memory of betrayal. It points toward Lena with a silent accusation, forcing her to relive the moment her ancestors' betrayal doomed their village. Lena is confronted with the realization that guilt can echo across centuries when left unacknowledged. Lena falls into despair as the vision realm intensifies. She feels unworthy to face these spirits, consumed by the shame of her lineage's actions. The drum pulses in her hands, acting like an anchor, but the voices fade, leaving her alone with the shadows. This is Lena's lowest emotional point, questioning whether she has any right to seek redemption for sins she did not personally commit but still inherited. The young woman from Lena's earlier visions appears again, emerging from the shadows with a steady, sorrowful presence. She acknowledges Lena's pain, but urges her not to let guilt paralyze her. Through symbolic gestures rather than dialogue, she reveals that their family's betrayal was complex, driven by fear, desperation, and manipulation. Emotional theme. Understanding that wrongdoing often grows from trauma, not inherent malice. The young ancestor guides Lena to stand before the accuser shadow. Lena must confront 3 truths. The wrong was real. No excuses can erase the harm done. The silence that followed was worse. For generations, the truth was buried, allowing wounds to fester. Healing begins only when someone has the courage to face the truth, and Lena is the first to try. With trembling resolve, Lena accepts her dual inheritance, the suffering and the responsibility. The shadow tests Lena's conviction, projecting visions of how her family benefited from betrayal. She sees her ancestors surviving and prospering at the cost of others, bloodline privilege built on sorrow. Emotional conflict. Lena feels disgust, heartbreak, and a fierce determination to break this cycle. She declares, through action and presence rather than words, her willingness to restore the truth and honor all who were lost. The accuser's shadow cracks, as if its form is held together by unspoken truths. With Lena's acceptance of responsibility, not blame, but acknowledgement, the shadow begins to dissolve. This symbolizes the first step toward healing, recognition. Suspense lingers, though the shadow dissipates. The vision realm begins to rupture violently, signaling that the unresolved emotional energy is destabilizing. Lena is thrown into a whirlwind of imagery. Fires, screams, tears, laughter, all tangled in a storm of memory. She tries to hold on to the drum, but becomes unbearably hot, glowing as if reliving its own trauma. Emotional surge. Lena feels the culmination of centuries-long grief surging through her, transforming her rather than breaking her. The young ancestor pulls Lena toward a blinding light, urging her to leave before the collapsing realm consumes her. Lena awakens on the cottage floor, drenched in sweat, gasping and trembling. The drum lies beside her, its carvings subtly altered, perhaps glowing faintly. or revealing symbols that were previously invisible. The voices are silent, but not gone. They wait. Lena realizes she has crossed a threshold. She is no longer just a witness to the past. She is now an active participant in its resolution. Lena feels sorrow and hope intertwined. She understands that confronting the shadows was only the beginning. She must now bring the truth to the living world, break the cycles of silence, and find a path toward restitution and reconciliation. Emotional closing note. For the first time, Lena feels the presence of her ancestors not as burdens, but as companions, guides who trust her to finish what they could not. Lena rises from the confrontation, physically drained but spiritually awakened. The world feels sharper, heavier, every movement tinged with the weight of what she has seen. The voices are quieter now, no longer shouting warnings but whispering guidance. Emotional focus. Lena feels a fragile but undeniable sense of purpose, as if she has been entrusted with something sacred. The drum now bears additional carvings, symbols that were not present before, faint but growing clearer as she observes them. Lena begins to decode the meaning of these new etchings. A mended circle symbolizing restored lineage. A rising flame indicating renewal after destruction. A branching path representing the future, still unwritten. These symbols reveal that the confrontation with the shadows has altered both her and the instrument, binding them further. Suspense and emotional resonance. Lena realizes the drum is guiding her toward specific actions in the living world. Lena visits elders in her community, particularly those who still hold fragments of ancestral knowledge. Some are wary, even frightened, when she speaks of the drum. They fear the return of old conflicts. Others are quietly supportive, recognizing in her the strength of the ancestors. Emotional tension. Lena must balance respect for community fear with the urgency of her mission. She learns that healing ancestral wounds often requires ritual acknowledgement, public truth-telling, symbolic restitution, and collective remembrance. Lena discovers that the descendants of those once harmed by her own ancestors still live nearby, carrying invisible generational wounds. She struggles with the moral weight of approaching them. Suspense. Will her attempts to uncover the truth reopen old wounds rather than heal them? Emotional conflict peaks as she fears rejection or anger, but knows silence would repeat the sins of the past. Lena organizes a small gathering with representatives from both her family's lineage and the descendants of the harmed community. Without revealing supernatural elements, she shares her findings, the erased conflict, the betrayal, the suffering that followed. The atmosphere is tense. Some people deny, some are stunned, some break down emotionally. The key theme: truth is painful but essential. Lena feels vulnerable yet resolute, sensing her ancestors silently supporting her. Not everyone welcomes the truth. A small but vocal group accuses Lena of stirring up unnecessary conflict, tarnishing their family's reputation, or reviving wounds best left buried. Suspense rises as these tensions threaten to tear the community apart. Emotional struggle. Lena feels temporarily defeated, wondering if her efforts will only deepen the rift. But the voices from the drum reassure her, through presence, not speech, that resistance often precedes transformation. Lena proposes a communal ritual of remembrance, inviting everyone, supporters and skeptics, to witness an unveiling of the past. She positions the drum at the center of a ceremonial circle. As she gently taps it, the voices manifest not as haunting cries, but as a chorus of memories, soft, human, honest. Participants feel echoes of lost stories tugging at their emotions, stirring tears, recognition, and empathy. This shared experience becomes a bridge between divided families, the supernatural blending seamlessly with communal memory. The ritual culminates in a symbolic gesture. Both sides contribute objects representing their ancestors, tokens of hardship, letters, tools, or small personal items. These are placed together around the drum, forming an unbroken circle symbolizing restored connection. Emotional breaking point. Descendants of the harmed community finally voice the pain they inherited, and Lena answers with humility and compassion. The group collectively acknowledges the wrongs done and commits to preserving the truth rather than burying it again. Sincere apologies are offered, not from guilt alone, but from genuine empathy. Tears flow freely. Old wounds surface, but begin to heal when witnessed openly. For the first time in generations, the community feels united in shared grief rather than divided by hidden wrongs. Lena experiences deep emotional resonance as the air feels lighter, the tension dissolving. The ancestors' presence becomes peaceful, almost warm, gently fading to the background, a sign of their satisfaction. After the ritual, Lena taps the drum one final time and is granted a vision, not of the past, but of what lies ahead. She sees children from both lineages playing together, shared cultural festivals, and a renewed community grounded in truth. She realizes this is the legacy she is helping build. Not perfection, but honest connection. Emotional theme. Redemption is not found by erasing the past, but by building a better future atop its lessons. Lena finally forgives herself and accepts her role as a bridge between worlds. She understands that her purpose is not to carry the burden alone, but to ensure it is never forgotten. The drum becomes a symbol of truth and healing in her life, a sacred responsibility she now carries with pride rather than fear. That night, the voices visit her one last time, not as cries or pleas, but as gentle murmurs of gratitude. The young ancestor places a hand on Lena's shoulder in the vision realm, offering a silent blessing. Emotional closure. Lena feels whole, connected to her past, grounded in her present, and hopeful for the future. Lena awoke to a strange stillness, one that felt peaceful instead of heavy. For weeks, the air around her had carried the weight of sorrow, fear, and unrest. But now, as she stepped outside and saw the early morning sun stretch over the treetops, she sensed a shift. The world felt cleaner, like something dark had finally been lifted. She stood there for a long moment, breathing deeply, trying to understand what had changed inside her. The ache that used to sit in her chest, the one shaped by guilt and confusion, was softer now, almost healed. She knew the path ahead would not be simple, but she finally felt strong enough to walk it. By mid-morning, people began to gather outside Lena's home. At first, only a handful stood there, older villagers, the ones who had listened with open hearts. But soon, families arrived. Young people who had never known the old stories. Elders who carried silent shame. Children who watched with wide, hopeful eyes. There was a tremor of uncertainty among them, mixed with something new, curiosity, maybe even courage. Lena stepped onto the porch, feeling the weight of their attention. This time, she didn't shrink from it. She felt grounded, held by the lessons she had learned and the ancestors who now rested peacefully. A woman approached her, a descendant of the family who had suffered most in the old betrayal. Her eyes were red and swollen, not from anger, but from the long night of emotional release. "Thank you," the woman said, voice trembling. "Not just for what you shared, but for giving us a chance to understand. We didn't know how much we needed it." Lena felt her throat tighten. "I only did what was necessary," she replied softly. "What our families, all our families, needed in order to heal." The woman nodded, and the two shared a quiet moment, one that spoke of forgiveness and new beginnings. The villagers invited Lena to walk with them to the old ritual grounds, the place where the tragedy had begun generations ago. Many hadn't stepped foot there in years. Some had never seen it at all. As they approached, Lena observed how time had changed the place. Vines crawled over once careful stone markers. The tall grasses swallowed the paths that were once walked with purpose. The air felt calmer now, though a faded sadness still lingered like a forgotten memory. Together, they cleared debris, cleaned the stones, and rebuilt the circle where rituals had once taken place. Hands that had once been divided now worked together, rebuilding something that belonged to all of them. For Lena, this act felt like stitching a wound closed after years of bleeding. Every branch lifted, Every stone straightened carried emotional meaning, small steps toward collective healing. With the grounds restored, the villagers asked Lena to lead a new ceremony, one not based on old rules or forgotten customs, but a ritual for the present, born from truth. She hesitated at first. She wasn't sure if she was worthy. She wasn't her ancestors. She wasn't perfect. But then she remembered the look on a young ancestor's face during the final vision. Calm, grateful, trusting. She realized this wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty, connection, and courage. So Lena stepped forward. She placed the remnants of the cracked drum in the center of the circle. Though the drum was broken, its presence still felt powerful, a symbol of everything that had been faced and overcome. Around it, she laid flowers, stones, and offerings from the community. People joined her, creating a circle not of fear, but of unity. Lena spoke clearly and gently, her voice steady. Today, we honor the truth. We honor all those who suffered, those who were harmed, those who carried guilt, and those who tried to protect what they believed was right. We honor the ancestors, not by repeating their mistakes, but by learning from them. The wind carried her words through the clearing. Even without the drum's ancient magic, the moment felt sacred. Villagers bowed their heads, some crying quietly, others breathing in relief. This ceremony was not about the past anymore. It was about choosing a future built on trust. That night, Lena dreamed again. But this time, there was no darkness, no cold air, no haunted whispers. Instead, she stood in a field of soft light. The spirits she had helped appeared around her, not angry or confused, but peaceful for the first time. Their faces were warm, grateful, almost glowing. The young ancestor stepped forward. His voice was clearer than ever before, though still gentle. "You have done what we could not," he said. "You carried our burden, and in doing so, freed us." Lena felt tears fill her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming release of everything she had held inside. The ancestor touched her shoulder lightly. "You may walk forward now. The past no longer binds you." As the spirits faded into the light, Lena felt a deep, quiet joy bloom within her. The next day, the village was full of new energy. People painted signs marking the ritual grounds as a sacred place. Children asked questions, and elders shared stories without fear. Families spoke openly about pain, forgiveness, and hope. Lena realized that the healing was not over, but it had truly begun. Several villagers approached her with an idea: to create a small community center where people could learn the true history, honor their ancestors, and pass these lessons to the next generation. Lena agreed. She offered to help, not as a shaman or a chosen one, but as someone who had simply walked through the storm and survived. On the final morning before returning home, Lena stood alone at the quiet edge of town. The sky glowed with soft pink light, the same color that filled her dreams of the spirit world. She held the cracked drum one last time. It no longer hummed with voices. It no longer carried pain. Still, it felt meaningful, like a final piece of the journey she had completed. Gently, she placed the drum on the ritual grounds, letting it rest among flowers and offerings. "Thank you," she whispered. A warm breeze brushed past her, almost like a silent reply. As she walked away, Lena felt lighter than she had in years. She had faced the shadows, restored balance, and helped heal wounds older than her own lifetime. Now, she stepped forward with renewed strength, ready to live not in fear of the past, but in the freedom of a future she helped create.